นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. I don't know if you could hear just now through the microphone, but here in the monastery it's dusk and all the birds are making a lot of noise as they do every night. So we have a lot of kookaburras outside doing their thing. If you know the kookaburra, they laugh and laugh and laugh to each other. It's one of the experiences of meditating in Australia. And there's a lot of bird life, and if you meditate first thing in the morning or last thing at night, you often hear loud noises from groups of birds. Cockatoos, they make a real racket. Sometimes it's deafening, you can't even talk, let alone hear anything. Kookaburras tend to last a bit shorter time when they start up, but nevertheless they're also pretty loud. But all these different birds, they can highlight how you perceive things as you meditate. Because if you're determined to meditate and have a very quiet place to meditate, and then you have a flock of birds nearby, you might quickly become annoyed or disappointed by all the noise they make. Or if you have a different outlook, maybe if it's kookaburras laughing, then maybe you can see it as a reminder just to laugh a bit at life, not take life so seriously, not to take your meditation so seriously, to lighten up a bit. Because, as someone was saying earlier today, when they meditate, they always have this very strong sense of self come up. And they start noticing, they say the first experience in meditation is always to notice what's wrong in their life. As they put attention on their breathing, they know the instructions to watch the breath, follow the breath, but straight away all the thoughts about what's wrong in their life. My meditation is no good, my health problems, my relationship problems, my work problems, everything that's a problem starts coming into the mind with a strong sense of me, mine, myself. But of course, as we meditate, we have a way of understanding that better. And especially if you meditate regularly, we do have to learn to lighten up a bit and not take every thought so seriously. Even if you do have a few problems in your life, the thought about those problems is just a thought. It just arises, passes away. Thoughts about your health, your money problems, your relationship problems, your work issues, your future, your past. These are just thoughts and memories that arise and pass away. So sometimes we also have to learn to not take things so seriously, otherwise we go crazy, don't we? I once stayed with the teacher, Ajahn Buddhadasa, and he said people go crazy because they attach to this sense of self so strongly. They take everything so seriously, every opinion, every thought, every memory. They take it so seriously that then it becomes like a burden on their mind, and this sense of self becomes really strong and deeply ingrained. So as we meditate, you be aware of that. You probably all have that same experience when you're meditating, the sense of me, myself, my meditation, my life, my this, my that will come up. And that tends to be associated with the feeling of stress or suffering. And once you have the idea of me, my suffering, my problem, it also fuels a lot of doubts, because if you see this regularly, if you meditate regularly, you tend to also have doubt come up. You say, why? Why do I have all these problems? Why me? Why am I the one with my health issue? Why am I the one who has a problem with someone at work? Why am I the one who can't meditate very well? Why am I this? Why am I that? With the feeling of I, me, mine, myself, comes the doubt. Why? Why do I suffer like this? So in the beginning of meditation is a very common experience. Noticing suffering in the body, noticing suffering in the way we're thinking, identifying with it as me, mine, myself, and taking it very seriously, giving lots of importance to what we think about things. And then we often get very uptight. But the meditation, particularly on something like the breath or the thought of loving kindness, these meditations are helping you to calm down, relax, and put your attention somewhere very neutral, very peaceful with mindfulness. It won't mean all your thoughts stop. That may take a long time, a lot of skill, a lot of practice to get to the point where all thought stops. What we call appana samadhi or jhana, where the mind is very still and just has one object. That's a very advanced state that maybe not that many people experience, or certainly not very often. But a more immediate benefit you get from meditation is just becoming more mindful and seeing a thought arise and pass away. You're not stopping thoughts, so you're not aiming to stop all thought, but you're aiming to have enough clarity and mindfulness just to see thoughts arising and ceasing. Just like the sound of the birds, the sound of the birds arises to your ear, and then it passes away again. And now it's gone dark, the birds have gone quiet. You never hear the birds chattering much at night. They're still going, obviously not completely dark yet. Anyway, in a few moments they'll have stopped. And our thoughts are like that. They arise, they pass away, and you can see that very quickly as you meditate. And that's what maybe the first understanding you'll get as you practice meditation, just to see that your mental activity is changing. And when you see that it's subject to change, it arises, it ceases, well then that's what helps you to let go of this sense of self and not take everything so seriously and get so wound up by it. Ajahn Chah used to say when this sense of me, mine, myself comes up in your thinking, which is most of the time, every time we're not mindful of it, it's like it's another turn of the screw. It's like another twist, making that screw or that bolt go deeper into your consciousness, the screw of self. If you compare it to a screw, it's like every time you say, me, myself, why me, why this, you're turning the screw a little tighter, and the feeling of dukkha, or suffering and stress, actually increases because of that. Whereas every time you're mindful of the breath, or you're aware of the impermanence, the arising and ceasing of thoughts and that sense of self, it's like untightening the screw a little bit. You're loosening it. And this is why the way out of suffering is this practice of mindfulness and then observation, investigation of the way things are. You're untightening or loosening the screw until eventually you can just pull it out. If you've ever disassembled some piece of furniture or some tool or something, and you unscrew something, at first you need a screwdriver or a power drill, and you twist and turn, and sometimes some things are very tight, it takes a lot of effort. But as you keep loosening that screw head, eventually you can probably do it with your fingers. It becomes very loose. It gets easier as you go. Letting go of this sense of self and loosening the sense of suffering that comes with it becomes easier the more you do it. So this is why they often say, the hardest part of meditation is just getting to start to do it. Because everybody has this thought, I think too much, therefore I can't meditate. The whole point is to practice bringing up mindfulness, to see your thoughts as just mental states that arise and pass away. And that leads on to seeing them that they're not really a self, they're not permanent, they're not a fixed self. They're just thoughts. And so your attitude to them starts to change. And rather than saying, I can't meditate because I got too many thoughts, or I'm suffering with all these stressful thoughts, there's another part of the mind that's the awareness, the mindfulness, and then the wisdom and the understanding that knows they're not really a self, they're not you, they're not a me, my, myself. They're what we call conditions of mind that come up but then go away again. You might call that the practice of vipassana meditation when you see that. And anyone can do this because anyone has enough mindfulness to do it. Because we can all be mindful enough to drive a car or put on our clothes in the morning, or eat a meal with a knife and fork without stabbing yourself, usually. Anyone can do that. That means you're mindful, you have mindfulness. It's just you need to apply it more deeply and particularly turn your attention inwards to observe your own mind more closely. And that's what we're doing as we practice meditation. The seeing of the thoughts and the feeling of a self, of me, my, myself, that's what we call wisdom or insight. That's the fruit of our practice, when we just know things as not self. That comes about through practicing this mindfulness and developing mindfulness. But actually you need some wisdom to even just begin meditating, to have the thought, I need to meditate, this will be good for me. Having heard some Dhamma teaching, there has to be that spark of wisdom that says this is worth doing, just to get you beginning. So sometimes people say, where do you start Buddhist practice? What do you need to start practicing the Buddhist path? Well, actually it's wisdom. Quite often gained from teachers, either the word of the Buddha himself or living teachers in this day and age. Hearing the Dhamma gives you a spark of inspiration, faith, and you say, if it works for them, maybe it can work for me, and then you want to try. You actually need wisdom first. Some people hear or read the Buddhist teachings, read the suttas, and they understand that you practice dana, generosity, sila, virtuous behavior, samadhi, develop some calm and peaceful states of mind, and then wisdom arises sort of right at the end. Actually, you need wisdom to begin the practice, just to see the value of it. So listening to the Dhamma, reading the Dhamma is very important. But then you have to put that, what you've heard, what you've read, into practice. And then your wisdom becomes more personal, internalize what you've read and heard. So we need wisdom to begin practice, and then we have to develop it by looking, observing what's going on, which is why we also need the mindfulness. Then people say, well, how much mindfulness do you need? I'm never going to be able to do it. I'm not like those monks who go off into the forest and meditate a lot. They get a lot of mindfulness. I can't do that. Maybe you have a family or job, or you're traveling or doing things. But mindfulness is an internal quality again, something you can develop in any posture at any time. It's not linked to a place. So you can be mindful in a very busy work environment, or when you're shopping, or when you're traveling, or you can be mindful in the forest. It's linked to what you're doing with your mind, of course, because it's an internal quality. So that's another doubt and another wrong thought, you might say, that you have to get over. You teach yourself it's not. You don't have to wait until you go into the forest or some quiet mountain or somewhere to do your mindfulness practice. You can practice right here, right now. And with the presence of mindfulness, your mind can pay attention to what's going on, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and you start to notice things. You notice thoughts arising, passing away, and that's where the deeper kind of insight, wisdom arises. You're seeing, thoughts, they arise and pass away. They're not me, they're not a person or a being, a self. They're conditions of mind, states of mind that come and go. So your mind starts to relax a bit, and you can laugh at yourself. Maybe when you've seen how strongly you were attaching with this sense of self, how tightly the screw was tightened in on a particular thing you were identifying with, an experience that happened and your reaction, you were angry, you were sad, you were worried, you were afraid, you were greedy. When we're not mindful, we attach very strongly to being that way, that's who I am. But now as you practice some mindfulness, maybe you can see, it's just a feeling, it's just a thought that came and went. It's nothing very serious, nothing very real, and the mind relaxes a bit and lets go. And whenever there's that letting go, you feel better. And if you let go often, then you realize this is something I can do, and you can do it more, and you can take on more. Letting go of a few thoughts in the beginning, maybe later you can let go of some real deep suffering associated with maybe you're ill and you're really depressed about your illness, but then you realize depression is just an attitude, just a way of thinking, just a state of mind that can be seen as impermanent and let go if you work at it. So the Buddha was encouraging us to practice. You may have to start small and humble. That's another problem, because we don't like to admit that we don't know things. In this modern age, who wants to admit that they don't know something? Everyone has to impress their friends, their boss, their colleagues, their neighbors by saying, I am somebody who knows how to do things, I am capable, I have all this skill and knowledge. We're kind of brought up to do that. When you come to meditate, you're actually doing the opposite, because in order to really develop mindfulness and insight, you have to admit your mindfulness and insight needs developing. I am not good at it, it's fine. It's okay to say I can't meditate very well. Not so that you stop, so you carry on and do it better and learn how to do it. But you have to have the beginner's mind and recognize I need to practice this. Again, this is a kind of wisdom. Noticing your weaknesses, noticing what you need to develop more is wisdom. The opposite is maybe conceit, arrogance, or just ignorance, where you think you know everything, or you think you know enough. As you hear so many times people say, I don't need to meditate, I don't have any suffering. Monks always laugh when they hear that, because you can almost see people suffering every day, every moment of every day. If you really look carefully, you can see yourself suffering, you can see other people suffering. Those people who say that, they just haven't looked very hard. And you just wait a few moments and they'll have to move their posture because their body is in pain. That's suffering already. And we have the suffering of, all kinds of unpleasant memories and mental states coming up. It's just nobody else, or the majority of people, don't know what you're thinking, so they don't notice, and you're not displaying it, so then you can give an impression that you're not suffering. But anyone who trains the mind knows, of course, you're suffering. There's stress. It may not always be extreme, thankfully. We get relief, we get moments when we're not suffering that much, but it's always there, kind of under the surface, isn't it? Because our mind is still moving, it's still not peaceful. It's still attaching, and this sense of me, mine, myself keeps coming up, and so we suffer. So we have to accept when we meditate we're not yet good at it. That's actually helpful, because then you will try, you'll put effort into learning. If you think you know already, it means there's no more knowledge, information you can receive. And then you can't learn, because you just think, I know already. So to be humble is actually a virtue in Buddhism. Ajahn Chah used to call it the earthworm's view of the world. You have to be more like the earthworm, humbly fertilizing the ground, oxygenating the earth, going around its business, about its business in a very humble way. Nobody wants to admit they're like an earthworm. We're all trying to impress everyone that we know we're on top of things, we're confident, we're good, in a more superficial way. So then we're not opening up to learn. So again, the quality of mindfulness you develop in your practice is a very neutral, unbiased quality. We say keeping your mind in the middle, just knowing the way things are. So it doesn't mean to say you have to have a false humility either, and sort of always say you don't know when you may know things, or you can't do when you can do things. It's not that either. It's just recognizing there are some things you know and you're aware of, and some things you don't. But when you're mindful, you're not creating this sense of self out of experience. You're just knowing a thought as a thought, or a view, whatever view and opinion comes up, you're just knowing it. And it may be a very good, well-developed view, a very true view or belief, or it may be a very crazy one, or it may be a very lowly, ugly thought, an ugly opinion about something. As you establish mindfulness, it's just knowing without adding any extra suffering onto the experience. So say you've become angry, well, you're just knowing, I've become angry. As soon as you establish mindfulness, you don't have to create further suffering by saying, I'm bad because I'm angry. Mindfulness is just revealing, this anger is suffering, best to let that way of thinking go, let the feeling subside, not do anything that may create further stress or suffering for me or others. When your mindfulness is there, it's like that. You're just knowing the experience. If it's a skillful thought, a good state of mind, well, you know that. You know the good and you know the not so good, but you don't create any self out of it when you're mindful. And wisdom can function well. You can see, this is a very skillful thought, this is the correct thought, or it's a very unskillful, unpleasant thought. Mindfulness gives you a certain choice and ability to know things as they are, rather than creating further suffering and stress out of them. Another aspect of mindfulness is this quality non-forgetting. So you develop it very directly when you're meditating, you're not forgetting the object of your meditation. So that could be the breath, not forgetting the breath. Or if you're contemplating arising and ceasing of phenomena, not forgetting impermanence. It's a very useful perception to keep in the back of your mind. It's not sure. And many of our chants and reflections that we use in Buddhism are just bringing you back to see that everything is not sure, it's not permanent, nothing lasts, conditions arise and pass away, helping you to see that more and more in your daily experience. Again, you don't need to go off into the forest to see impermanence at work. You get up in the morning and there's impermanence all around you. How your body feels from moment to moment through the day is changing. How you look, like as a teacher, everyone comes to the monastery and they always have an opinion about the way I look. They say, "Oh, Ajahn, you look really bright and happy today," or "Oh, Ajahn, you look really tired today." So I get a reflection on impermanence every day of my life because people comment on the way I look. I'm not even sure it's accurate, but at least they're reminding me of the impermanent nature of my face. Other people who haven't seen me for a while, they say, "Oh, Ajahn, you look really old. Last time I saw you, you look much younger." That's a common one as well. Really, all they're doing is saying, "Oh, it's impermanent, isn't it? The way you look, the way you feel is impermanent. The thoughts that arise in your mind are impermanent." Can you predict what you'll be thinking 5 minutes from now? You can't do that, can you? It'll depend on the conditions. You might say, "Oh, in 5 minutes from now I'll be listening to this Dhamma talk, I'll be mindful and concentrating on the sound." But up here we get a lot of power cuts. So say the power goes, well, this Zoom talk will end. Then you'll be thinking something different. You say, "How can I get the Zoom back?" Or whatever it may be. Everything around us and within us is changing all the time. So if you keep up the perception of impermanence, you don't forget that. You learn many things very quickly. And you learn that sense of self, me, mine, myself, is also impermanent. And when mindfulness is very strong, the sense of self fades into the background. So knowing the breath, or knowing a thought arising and ceasing, the sense of self is not there. So mindfulness is a quality to develop, and when it's present, when we train and it's present, it liberates the mind from this sense of self and the proliferation that comes with it. Even the very strongest emotions that overwhelm us, if mindfulness is strong, there still remain emotions that arise, pass away. It could be fear, anxiety. If you keep practicing, then often you have breakthroughs, don't you? When you keep being patient with a particular emotional reaction that comes up over and over again, that at first maybe bothered you. Like somebody was saying recently, they were diagnosed with some really difficult health issues in their body, and they had some treatment and surgery, and then that didn't work and things were getting worse. They spent months and months in hospital, but they were also listening to Dhamma, practicing mindfulness as they were doing this. And they said they reached a point where this sense of self that came up, the anxiety around the body and the health issues they were facing and whether they would improve or not, they got to the point where they just had nothing more they could think about it, because there's nothing they could do. They're just waiting for treatment in hospital. So they reached a point where the mind was just peaceful. They had thoughts, so many thoughts, because anxiety tends to be like that. You think many, many thoughts, worrying about the future, what's going to happen, will I get cured, when will the pain stop? All these kind of thoughts come up into their minds so much for so many months in a row that they'd reached a point where there's just nothing more to think about. He said, I just have to wait for the doctors to do their treatments. If it works, good. If it doesn't work, I just have to accept that. They kind of thought it out to the point where the sense of self had gone quiet, and they were ready to just let go of their body and whatever outcomes. Practicing this meditation is quite like that. Quite often you keep meeting the same problem, the same way of thinking, the same reactions, the same suffering. And it's hard work, which is why the Buddha said you need your patience. But if you are patient and you keep working with whatever the problem is, you often get a breakthrough in that particular attachment, the desire, the worry, the negativity towards some aspect of yourself or your life fades away, because you just know it's just a mood, it's just a thought. Another one that's very prevalent these days is low self-esteem. So not just being conceited, arrogant, thinking that you don't need anything, you're not suffering. There's also, we get flip into the opposite. We have low self-esteem, a lot of negativity, disappointment, frustration about things that we've desired and wished for, ambitions, plans that never came to fruition. And then we often start to look at ourselves in a very negative way. Again, if you can establish mindfulness, you catch the habit. Notice how it's one way of looking at experience. When you're caught into self-criticism, self-aversion, you're only looking at one side of the story at that time. And those thoughts and those emotions also arise and pass away. You may latch onto them with a sense of self, but if you keep working at it to establish mindfulness, they're just another thought. I am a failure, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I made this mistake, that went wrong. Again, it tends to trigger the doubt, why is everything so hard for me, why has everything gone wrong? We tend to have the doubt following on from the negative thought. But if you can establish some mindfulness and just observe, it's just thinking, it's just thoughts arising and passing away. If we strip everything back to the basics, the basics in Buddhism is that you're born as a human being. Already this is an amazingly good thing. We tend to focus on what's wrong. So we say, well, I'm a human being and I want to be successful or rich or famous or a good meditator or whatever it is you're aspiring to. Okay, but just being a human being is already an amazing thing, having achieved that much to achieve a human birth. And sure, some things go wrong, but there'll always be, once you're born, there's always a whole range of things to appreciate, to be grateful for. And to be born as a human being, to have heard the Dhamma, to have a chance to meditate. Even if you don't meditate very much or you don't listen to much Dhamma, at least sometimes meditating, sometimes listening to the Dhamma is already good. To have people who have loved you or helped you, often people say you have a relationship which goes wrong and you split with somebody, then you're caught up in the sadness of the situation, thinking, life is no good, I've split with my partner, there's all kinds of problems maybe. But it doesn't mean to say nobody has helped you in your life. You may have received lots of help up to this point, even though currently you're experiencing a separation in your relationship or some problem. There'll be parents and relatives and friends and all kinds of people who have helped you maybe over and over again in your life previously. And that help that you received is still there in place, even if currently you're experiencing some disappointment or failure or problem. The Buddha encouraged us to reflect regularly on those who have helped us, to bring up this sense of gratitude. He said it's a part of wisdom. It's a function of wisdom to know that you are not alone in the world and people have helped you. When you're aware of that, then your mind kind of goes to a higher place, doesn't it? You're seeing a bigger picture than just your immediate personal suffering. The sense of me, myself fades when you cultivate gratitude and appreciation for those who have helped you. Changes your perspective. And even though you may be experiencing pain, suffering, problems in the present moment, you reflect back on the help you've received, and your outlook improves immediately. So it's a central part of what we call right view, sammaditthi, appreciating the good that we've done and the good that's happened to us. And sometimes you even need to consciously sit down and do that to kind of revive faith, inspiration in the practice, to revive some wholesome states, revive the motivation to keep precepts, meditate and so on. You need to reflect on gratitude to do that, to then see the value of going on in the practice. Obviously, depression, low self-esteem, negativity is a sort of downward spiral, so you have to be careful not to get too caught into that. And this is why the Buddha said regularly reflect on those who have helped us, the good we've done, the good that people have done to us, because it brings up gratitude and appreciation. So when you practice mindfulness, at least for short periods at first and maybe later for longer, more continuous periods, this sense of self fades. One of the first benefits is it's peaceful. When that voice of self goes quiet, the why me, why does this happen to me goes quiet, you feel quite peaceful. And even if you're experiencing physical pain or suffering, or surrounding conditions are not ideal, you've had some blows, some difficult things have happened in your day or your life, if you establish mindfulness and you practice it, your mind immediately improves. You feel better because you're not latching on to the negative thoughts. If you keep practicing that and you get better at it, well, the sense of me, myself, the craziness of the mind that takes everything so seriously, gives so much importance to every thought, every memory, subsides a bit, goes quiet. The mind starts to feel lubricated. The practice of mindfulness is very close to the practice of kindness and compassion. And these qualities, mindfulness, kindness, compassion, are also very closely linked to wisdom. Because when you understand suffering and how it comes up, that's wisdom. When you can see it in yourself, you can see other people are much the same as yourself. So as mindfulness, compassion, wisdom arise, these have a lubricating effect on your mind. It's like water. In Buddhism, we have a lot of metaphors for good qualities are water. The Dhamma is compared to water. Merit and wholesome karma is compared to water. Kindness and compassion is compared to water. And water has this cleansing, lubricating effect on the heart, on the mind. So when monks, they give blessings, they often bless with holy water, they make holy water. Or when people make merit for the dead, they pour water. When we want to express gratitude to a senior monk or an elder in our family, a parent, grandparent, we often bathe their hands with water and so on. People bathe the feet of monks when they come back from alms round and so on. Water has this cleansing, refreshing effect. And these qualities are like that. The mindfulness, the compassion, the wisdom, they lubricate the mind and refresh and cleanse the mind. That's why they're called meritorious. And when your mind is well lubricated, then nothing sticks to it. So you can let go better because of the presence of these qualities. Again, this sense of self that is associated with suffering, with a sense of low self-esteem perhaps, or self-aversion, negativity, the doubt, why me, why am I suffering? That's the opposite. That's when the screw is tightened in, when the water is gone, everything is dry, everything is sticky, not lubricated. Then you have the feeling of suffering at its strongest, isn't it? As you bring up mindfulness, gratitude, kindness, compassion, it's like the mind is lubricated. These thoughts that you were previously stuck on or attached to start to loosen. Things improve. When things improve, then you look at yourself and the world in a different light. Look at it from a more positive light, and that leads on to other skillful thoughts, skillful attitudes arising. Another one of those problems people are always saying is they can't find the good person. Someone was saying, at their workplace, everyone is so negative, just says negative things about each other, about the world, about the government, about this, about that. They're finding it very oppressive hearing all this negative conversation. And so I said, my first response was, find somebody who speaks more positively then and spend time with them. They said, there isn't anyone. Another negative comment. There is no positive person. Everyone just says the negative things. Okay, well then you have to associate with yourself. Which is what the Buddha pointed to, is that if you can't find the person who speaks well, speaks the truth, speaks with kindness, then stay by yourself is all right. With other people just smile, but don't spend too much time with them. If they're only saying negative things, gossiping, backstabbing, saying very depressing things, well, don't spend too much time with them. Just as in your own mind, don't spend too much time with your own negative thoughts. Let them go. Spend more time with the positive. If you can't find the positive outside, the good in other people, well, look for the good in yourself. If you can't find it yet, well, work harder. Nobody can do that for you. You have to do it for yourself. So maybe for tonight, I'll just say this much and leave the talk there, and in a moment, if there's any questions, we can try and answer them for you.